Okay, thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Andy Langhurst, and I'm the coordinator in the public access room. And Keanu Young and I will be talking to you today about how to use the interim. So this will be probably one of our shorter um, workshops, so we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. It'll also be a variety of things. So I'm going to start out by talking about the governor's roles and deadlines, since that's coming up right now. How to find the acts and laws as they are finalized and going forward. We'll be talking about how you can use the interim as advocates or interested parties, and working with legislators during the interim as well. And then at the end, like I said, we'll have some time for questions. So the governor's role is a very important one in the legislative process, since he's got the ability to sign bills into law. The procedure for enactment is outlined in the Hawaii State Constitution in Article 3, Section 16. We'll be talking about approval or veto, as well as how to contact the governor. So for the governor's deadlines, the last day of the legislative session for 2026 was May 8th. The Hawaii State Constitution outlines what the deadlines are based on the number of days after sine die. So June 30th is the last day for the governor to submit an intent to veto list, a list of bills that he is considering for potential veto, needs to be submitted by June 30th. And then July 15th is the last day that the governor can sign bills, can veto bills, or allow bills to become law without signature. July 15th is also the deadline for the legislature to consider trying to override a veto with two-thirds of a vote in each chamber in a special session. And the Constitution also outlines that they must convene before noon, at or by noon, I think might be the language, on July 15th. The governor can also do line item vetoes, and this is the language towards the top of this slide, is talking about that bills that have appropriations, where there's individual amounts of money appropriated, the governor can do adjustments to strike out or reduce the amount, or the governor can veto bills, but the governor cannot do line item vetoes in non-appropriation bills. So, in a minute, we'll get to how you can see what bills have already been signed or where you can find the intent to veto list. And so far on the intent to veto list, um, you can see, sorry, that the budget bill is already on the intent to veto list. So that's just putting it out there for the legislature to be thinking about. And then, like I said, by June 30th is when the governor needs to identify any other bills that he's considering vetoing. The bill that I'm showing here is from 2024, so it wasn't the executive budget bill. It was a bill relating to agricultural biosecurity, where you can see the individual amounts that have a line through them and a handwritten amount written in with the governor's initials after it. And so this is just an example of what line item vetoing can look like. So if you are following bills, whether you're in favor of them or in opposition to them, you can contact the governor at this point, or the governor's office, to provide feedback on what you're thinking about. If you've not been to the governor's website before or just don't remember how to get there, at the bottom of the capital.hawaii.gov, the legislature's webpage, there is a gray box at the bottom, and there is a link to both the governor and the lieutenant governor web pages, as well as the public access room. So just scroll down to the bottom of capital.hawaii.gov, and you can find the link to go to governor.hawaii.gov as a website, or you could just type that in. From the governor's webpage, at the top of the webpage, there are different options, and one of them is Contact Us. From the Contact Us page, you can click on Comments on Legislation to get to a form. and you can fill out a form to provide your feedback on comments on legislation. So the way the form is set up is you would put in an individual bill number, and you could put a position of support, oppose, or comments. And you could also put a message, or you can attach a document if you've already written up a letter and you want to attach it that way. So going back to how do you find the acts? So on the capital.hawaii.gov page, going to the reports and list page, and scrolling to the very bottom of the page. And this is the page that's marked deadline tracking at the top. So it's the same place where we would see what bills have been introduced. But if you scroll to the very bottom of the page, in the legislature section, just under the title of this slide, you could see the bills that passed the legislature. And then there is the governor's actions section where you could click on acts, for example. I'll talk about pending governor's actions. Um, their governor's intent to veto link is there also. So there's a variety of links right there. When you click on the acts report, for example, we can see that 123 measures, bills that passed the 2026 legislative session have already been signed into law. We'll see the bill number along with the act number, and the act number is chronological in the order that the bills were signed into law. If you click on the act number, you can get to the governor's message to see what it looks like when the governor has signed the bill, or you can click on the PDF, which is to the left. So that PDF and the number one are going to show you different documents. So if I was to click on the number one, for example, on the left side of this slide, you can see Governor's Message 1101, and this is from 2025. And you can see the letter where the governor has sent to Senate President and Vice and House Speaker to say that on this date, the following bill was signed into law, and it has the bill number and the title of the bill. If I scroll to the second page, that little bit at the very bottom left that's cut off, that's the second page of the document. And so you can see that it's been stamped, approved by the governor with the date stamp. And then above the bill number, there is now Act 001. On the right side of this slide, so with the green outline around it, you can see the PDF. And then the PDF, if I had clicked on that, it would show me the normal bill language that we would use as we're going through the legislative session to see what does the bill say. So one will have the signature, one is just going to show you what is the most recent version, the final version of the bill. Then if I go back to the governor's actions page, I could look at the bills that are still pending governor's actions. For example, if I wanted to see, are there any bills that I do want to provide comments to the governor about what I think he should do in terms of signing or potentially vetoing a bill. If I click on the bills pending governor's actions, as of this morning, there are still 144 records returned. So that was 123 acts have already been signed. 144 are still pending the governor's action. And so you can see that the act column is not on this report because it hasn't happened yet. And that report will decrease in number as things move to the acts page or to the vetoed page. You can also find the act number if you also just want to see what does it look like from the measure status page of a particular bill. This is the measure status page from 2025 for HB 1440, which made appropriations for the expense of the legislature and other things. So there's still the act on the lower left where I could click that Act 1 and again see the GM that we looked at a minute ago. You can also see in the status text where it's day by date that this bill was transmitted to the governor in late February of 2025 and then became Act 001 in March 13th. And you can see that both the House and the Senate have recorded that as an update to the measure status page. And then again, if I had clicked on the Act 1 on the previous page, it's still showing me the governor's message number, the letter, the Act number, and the bill number. So all of those things are connected if I wanted to go and look up the bill number page, for example, or if I wanted to go look at the session laws of Hawaii for 2025, I know that this is Act 1. And then it's still on that GM, um, I can see where I could scroll down. So from the far left side, and this is something that I think you can do in your own browser, so it doesn't always look the same um, right away. You might have to click on a thing. But on the far left side, I can see the letter, a little image of the letter. I can see that I am showing page 2, where it's got the approved by the governor and the Act 001 above the HB 1440 bill number. And then the little inset part in green is showing how you could see on the governor's message the signature by the governor. Now, stepping away from what's currently going on, in terms of finding the laws, just as kind of a refresher, all the all the acts that get signed into law in 2026 will go into a book, the Session Laws of Hawaii, SLH, for 2026. And then the permanent laws of 2026 will get incorporated into the Hawaii Revised Statutes, which is the 14 codified volumes where laws are arranged by topic area. So everything that passes in 2026 will go into the session laws, but only the permanent laws will go into the HRS. So, for example, appropriation amounts or bills that are for a limited period of time, maybe it's for a year or 2 years, or it's going to sunset. That's the difference between when we look in the session laws or when we look in the HRS. And keep in mind that even if the governor is signing bills into law right now for 2026, once that's all done, the Revisor of Statutes Division in the Legislative Reference Bureau will then start working on updating those two documents. So the SLH and the HRS on the website are not immediately updated because there's going to be, more than 250 bills, presumably, that then they need to start arranging in the right order and get formatted for printing. So, for finding the laws online, if you've been using the legislature's website this session, you might have recall that the Senate webmaster team did some really nice updates to how we use the search box. It used to be that you could do a search by HRS or do a search by session law. But they weren't super nice looking searches. And so I think that the improvements they've made make for a much better user experience. But keeping in mind that this will change how we look for HRS going forward if you haven't had to do this since they've made the changes. So in this example, if I was doing a search from the capital.hawaii.gov website and from the big blue bar at the top, what I'm going to call the primary search box, if I wanted to search for bills or that became law, so things that went into the HRS using the keyword smoking, I could type in smoking here and I could either click the filter box will pop up where you could filter by measures, hearings, HRS, legislators, committees, or documents. I could pick HRS here to narrow down the search results to just things that are showing up in the HRS. And we'll talk more about how to find session laws after this. Or if I had just typed in smoking and hit enter, once I got to the results page, underneath the search bar, we can still see where I could change the content type to either all content or to just measures if I wanted to see proposed legislation, or just HRS if I wanted to see what is in the HRS. And on the left side, underneath where you've got that search precision bar where you could say broad or exact, you could search by, I think, volume, chapter, maybe section, I can't remember. And that'll expand it. So if you knew that the law you were looking for was in volume 3, you could narrow down your search results from those left side filters. So when I search for smoking, the first thing that comes up is HRS Chapter 712. On this next screen, I'm scrolling down more, and I, for my example, I know that I'm looking for HRS Chapter 712, Section 1257, which in this case is the third result. So I would just scroll from the top of the page until I find the example I'm looking at, and you can see that it's highlighted the word smoking since that was my search term. And once I find it as result three, I could either click on, where it says HRS Chapter 712, Section 1257, or the text immediately under it, or cut off from this page, but you can see it on result number two just above. I could click on full text. So clicking anywhere in that box basically will then take me to the results. And this is another change from what we did in previous years. In previous years, when you were doing an HRS search, it would just take you to an image of an HRS page. Now it takes you directly into the HRS itself, which is, I think, nicer looking, but also you can use the previous or next button. So I can see that this is chapter 712, 1257 about prohibited cigarette sales of less than 20. If I wanted to see what happens immediately before that or immediately after that in the HRS, now I can click on next or previous and go forward and backward on the HRS portion of the website. And then if you don't already do this, we do it a lot in the public access room, but if I had, say, a much lengthier result than this, and I was looking for, say, I thought there was one sentence where it was going to say smoking, I could do a Control F on my keyboard, or if you've got an Apple or a Mac, you could do Command F, and then it pops up this search box where I could type in my search term. It'll tell me how many times it shows up on the page, and then as we can see, it's highlighted it in yellow here. And so that's again a nice way to keep looking through documents to narrow in on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for session laws, there's no longer a specific session law content type like there had been in the previous version of the search. But you can still get it to it pretty easily. I still do my search as smoking, but this time instead of searching for measures or HRS, the session laws is rolled up into the documents. And I guess I would think about it kind of like the document search is searching a variety of types of PDFs. So once I filter it by content type of documents, then on the left side filter menu, I can filter it by category. So I could filter it like by session laws the same way I would be able to filter by GIA applications because those are also PDFs. So again, doing my search for smoking if I'm looking for session laws, what it looks like as a session law, filtering it by the document content type, and then looking for the category feature on the left side and filtering it by session laws. So in this case, my result is coming up. It looks like it's found 49 results in as a document search, but the first one is a session law from 2025, SLH 2025, Act 95. So Act 95 of 2025. And then if I click on that result, whether click on the text itself or the View PDF button, it'll take us into the session laws, and you can see the URL at the top of the page. It's still the capital.hawaii.gov website, and now it has SLH for session laws. It's showing me it's searching at SLH or bringing it back from SLH 2025, and it's showing me it's Act 95. And again, if I wanted to get other information from here, I could see that it's Act 95, which was also HB 441. Keep in mind that session laws, there will be a session law 95 or a session law in Act 1 for every year. So Act 95 of 2025 will be different than Act 95 of 2026, the same way that there could be multiple House Bill 441s, for example. So it's important to think about what year something happened. And so I'm going to now that I know it's House Bill 441, I want to find out more about House Bill 441. So in this case, I'm going to go look in the archives of the capital.hawaii.gov website. So from the big blue bar, clicking on Laws and Research, from the same place where I could click on Reports and Lists, towards the bottom of that drop-down box, now I can see Archives. And you can search the archives. There's a drop-down menu for the year. Um, and it goes back to something like 1999, although 2013 forward is what we're most used to seeing in terms of the amount of testimony, links to committee reports, things like that. So the farther back in time you go, the less that all the content is digitized, and you may have to go to, for example, the Hawaii State Archives just next door to us, and they might have it in boxes as paper documents still. But in this case, if I had HB 441, I could change this year drop down to 2025, and then where it says measure status under search on the left side, I could just type in HB 441, no periods, no spaces or anything like that, and that's how I could get to a measure status page. But we could also do it through the no primary search as well. So just a lot of different options, and the public access room is happy to help you try out all these different options to find what you're looking for. Okay, just kind of buzzing through a few more things till we get to how you can use the interim. Other ways to look for Hawaii revised statutes or the session laws is from that Laws and Research menu at the top of capital.hawaii.gov. You could click on Hawaii revised statutes or on session laws. If I click on Hawaii revised statutes, I could do more like a browsing search where I could look within a volume or within a chapter. Or if I didn't know where the document is, or where the law is, I could click on this index icon that's circled in green. The index will pull up a many hundreds of pages of an index like you'd find in the back of a book. And once the document loads, you need to give it a couple minutes just because it's such a big document. You could do another Control F search, for example, for smoking or for condominiums or for education or something like that to see all the places that that search term is mentioned in the HRS, and then it would tell you where to look in terms of the chapter, for example. So feel free to use the index, but the primary search is also getting more robust. So maybe we'll find ourselves using the primary search more. I'm not sure. And then same thing for session laws. If you're not familiar with this page, it's again through Laws and Research. Then you click on session law. Then it'll show you all the years that the session laws are recorded. You could click on the year itself. This little inset menu on the lower right corner is showing me all the regular session laws of 2025, and you just click 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever act number it is. You could see an index of the acts or a PDF of all the acts. Up a little bit farther on the session laws, you could also see executive budgets. If you wanted to quickly find out what the executive budget was every year, it compiles it into a list so that I could know that it was HB 1800 this year and HB 300 last year, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing with judiciary budgets and OHA budgets. All right, so going a little bit, changing gears and going a little different direction, talking about how you can use the interim. So this is a great time to reassess and regroup after session. It's just over a month after the legislative session has ended. Hopefully you still remember some things that happened. I know we forget easily when we're not in it day to day. But an important thing to think about doing is debriefing after session, taking the time to just think about what happened, maybe make some notes about it, and that can influence what sort of game plan you want to have over the next few months and then going into the 2027 session. And at the same time that you're reassessing and regrouping and thinking about what happened, you also want to be thinking about how you can network to be prepared for next session. So questions you could ask yourself about the bills that you were championing or following, or if you were opposed to them. What worked well for what you were doing, or in terms of how the bill was moving forward, and what didn't work well? Did you have ideas as the session was going of what didn't work well and what you could do differently going forward, or could you think about that now? Were there times where you realized you didn't know as much as you needed to know and you wish you had known something else? Like you wish you had known that some particular groups were going to bring up a counter argument, or that the legislators were going to bring up an issue that you didn't think would be an issue and they had questions about? Any ideas that came up during the session that you didn't have time or the resources to follow up during the session, jotting those down now so you can start thinking about what your game plan will be and what you'll be doing during these quiet months of the interim, so you're not losing momentum. One thing that we would recommend is that you review the testimony. You go back and look at all the testimony that was submitted for bills that were of interest to you, or do a new search for a particular subject and start familiarizing yourself with what those bills were. Of course, looking at the different versions of the measure and seeing how the text of the bill changed as it went through the process can be useful. Looking back, especially if a bill didn't succeed this year and needs to be reintroduced for 2027, did anything fall out that you thought was particularly useful that you want to advocate to be put back in? Or are there things that came up during the bill process that you hadn't thought of that are still important to be there? You can also be looking at who provided testimony. Are you finding allies that you didn't know about, people that are on the same page as you that you want to try to work with? Or are there points of opposition that you didn't expect that you want to be better prepared to talk about, or to talk on the alternate side, I guess, in the new legislative session, or be better prepared to respond to those concerns? Maybe be ready to put that in your testimony if you need to, as we start the new session. So, looking at both the committee reports, which is circled here, as well as the testimony files just beneath it, and refamiliarizing yourself with what were the legislators saying in their committee reports and what were people providing testimony on related to issues that are important to you. I'd also suggest that you consider reviewing the hearing, the recordings of the hearings that happened. And from the measure status page, you can go underneath the committee reports and underneath the testimony and find the hearing notices. So clicking on the YouTube link, sometimes you'll want to look on the agenda to find at what point in the recording is it likely to be. But looking through these hearing recordings, again, will tell you what the testifiers said, but reviewing it to see if any of the legislators made comments or asked questions that you want to follow up on now. And again, any of the advocates with whom you could collaborate. So really just kind of regrouping, reassessing what happened, part of your debrief, and preparing for what you want to be prepared for next session. So, one thing I'll point out, you might not have noticed this. Now, when you click the YouTube button, it pops up an inset YouTube video on the page. So it doesn't automatically take you into YouTube. And sometimes this is really nice because it doesn't open up a new browser. But I do want to make sure that we don't forget that the the technical staff that are supporting the committees do some nice work in doing timestamps. So once this box point pops up, you can click in one of two places to watch the video on YouTube. And then once you get into the hearing, this is just scrolling down the hearing. The video would be just above where this image is showing. This doesn't happen right away necessarily, but certainly from interim, you're more likely to see it. They will put timestamps where if you go to the description of the video, now we can see where is SB 100 or where was SB 1588. And clicking on that timestamp will take you directly into the video. so that you're not just having to pull that little red cursor bar back and forth trying to guess where it is. So that's a nice thing that is easier to do in the interim when you're trying to debrief and consider what happened. So just wanted to make sure everybody knows that you can do that. So in terms of sketching out a game plan of what you want to do for next session, think about what you learned and where do you want to focus next. Is there research you want to do in terms of looking at past similar legislation? You could see who supported it and who opposed it. You could look on the measure status page to see on the committees were legislators, specific legislators voting for it or voting against it. You could be researching what other states are doing if they have similar legislation. Do they have ideas that have worked for them that might be able to fit Hawaii's situation? And just thinking in general of what can you learn or what do you need to learn more about in these 6 months before the next session starts. And sketching out a to-do timeline, thinking about what action items you want to take and who you want to talk to and when. Sometimes, right now, because election season is happening, it might be hard to talk to legislators that are up for reelection. So, considering that you might need more lead time to try to make an appointment, or maybe certain legislators will be more available later in the interim than they are right now. And keep thinking about how you want to keep your stakeholders informed, whether that's stakeholders, people you work with or work for, or other community members that are interested in the issue, not letting people forget that this is still an issue that they want to advocate for or against as the next session approaches. And then in terms of networking, you want to be thinking about are there any key advocacy groups or individuals that are particularly vocal that are aligned with where you're coming from that you want to try to get involved with, to collaborate with? Or are there allies that you know of that you could help divide up research and tasks so it doesn't feel like it's all on one person? And using social media to get the word out. But the other thing, other people you want to network with, is working with legislators. So thinking about how you want to stay connected, if you want to shore up support, making sure the legislators aren't losing track of an issue that they supported this year, that they're still going to support or understand why it's still going to be critical for their attention next year. Or building relationships with new legislators as elections happen. And then thinking about who are you going to be requesting bills from and how you want to start those conversations. Keep in mind that as you are collaborating, it may be a lot easier to ask for support from a legislator or their staff if you've been maintaining a relationship with them in the quiet time, so that you're not just coming to them once a year and asking them for something, but you're trying to maintain a collegial relationship. Where they recognize you, they understand where you're coming from, and you get to know a little bit more about how the staff and how the legislator might like to receive information or what kind of pacing they're on. So just getting to understand people a little bit more. So in terms of meeting with your legislators, make sure you're prepared before you show up. Consider making an outline for yourself of what are your top things to bring up, or do you want to present them with a timeline you're thinking of and asking them if it works for them? Consider a leave behind document, and we'll talk about that more. I'm sure a lot of you already work on things like that, but maybe even just taking a step back and saying, is the way we've conveyed information working, or could we do it differently? Do we need to change up the information that we've been sharing? Is it getting stale? Are there new issues? When you're meeting with legislators, make sure that you're allowing time for them to ask questions. And think about how you would respond if they asked you questions you couldn't answer. It's completely reasonable to say, I don't know the answer to that, I'll get back to you. But thinking about it before you're put in the situation, makes it come off a little bit more smoothly and not as much like you've been stumped and maybe you're not as familiar with an issue as you want to be. But also thinking about both of the legislators and their staff asking for advice. People like to be asked for their opinion. We all do. Asking somebody what they think an appropriate timeline should be. Do they have a date in mind where they want to be asked for bills to be introduced or consider that bills being introduced? Or do they have ideas on people you could talk to about your issue? So kind of think of all of that as you're thinking about how you want to work with legislators during this interim period. If you're communicating via email or phone or letter, make sure you're thinking about how you're identifying yourself. Are you a constituent? Or are you contacting them because they are the chair of a committee or a member of a committee that's specific to your issue? Are you bringing them a concern, a problem, an opportunity? Are you just asking for advice? Trying to keep it short and simple, something that's easy to read and refer back to, that you're not burying the important information at the bottom or in the middle. Thinking about how you want to present it so that it makes sense quickly. And then are you going to follow up with them? Do you want to say, I'll follow up with you in 2 weeks or a month so that they know what to expect? You don't want to surprise them if you call back 2 days later and they're not ready for you because they didn't realize that you were on a timeline. And remember to be polite and appreciative of their time, of course. So if you're requesting a bill, think about how you want to sum up your proposal, thinking about when you want to approach legislators about your bill idea, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. Thinking about who you want to approach. If you've been on our workshops before, you've heard us say that starting with the legislator that represents the area where you live is a good idea or where your business is located. But you could also think about approaching committee chairs, legislators that are going to be more likely to be informed about an issue. Or looking to see legislators that introduced similar legislation in the past, also still familiar with an issue. And then how you want to follow up. Um, just thinking about all of these things as you consider how you're going to be requesting a bill. The public access room has a example one pager for legislators, a leave behind document. There's no right way to do this. This is more of an idea for you to think about how you're sharing information, how you're outlining your information, putting it in a way that isn't paragraphs upon paragraphs, if you can help it, using bullet points to help things stand out, putting it into categories, starting with a background, ending with an ask, putting a list of supporters or contact information if that's relevant to you. So this is just something that you can consider using to formulate your own type of leave behind document if you think that works for your issue. And I forgot to say this earlier, but there have been QR codes, and when we share the slides, the QR codes will be there. These QR codes will take you to pages that have more information. So this QR code goes to a PAR website that in the middle of that, it's the introduction of an idea page on the public access room website. In the middle of that page, there's a link to this one-page document if you want to take a look at it. But considering having a sheet to leave behind that the legislator or their staff can refer back to can be super helpful. This also could be useful as you think about your own kind of what you're trying to accomplish in the meeting. So in terms of important dates, keeping in mind that this is an election year, so things might be a little bit busier for certain legislators. Typically, early October is the time period where departments are submitting their budget requests to the Department of Budget and Finance for review for the governor's executive budget. Usually we say by Thanksgiving, you want to have contacted legislator with bills ideas. Keep in mind that legislators may already have a list of bills by the time Thanksgiving comes around. Hopefully they're not all full up now, but they may have a list of bill ideas and may not have the capacity to introduce every bill that they get asked to introduce. they also need to be working with drafting agencies to get the bill put into the appropriate language. And so Thanksgiving is usually a good time to be making sure you have those requests done so that they can think about it themselves, think about other things they're being asked, ask the drafting agency to also be working on the bill language. Usually in December, the grant and aid applications are released. And then late December or early January is usually when we see the session calendar released. And that's something that the Senate President and House Speaker have to agree on. And that's also after that is when the public access room can put out the calendar because we really don't know what the different deadlines will be until that calendar is released. We do know because it's written into the Hawaii State Constitution that opening day, and that should say 2027 session, will be January 21st. The third Wednesday in January is always the start of session. And then just based on past years, we'd expect that the bill introduction cutoff date may be around January 30th. But again, until the Speaker and the President release the session calendar, we don't know that date for sure. So that's just kind of an idea. And then keep in mind that this is a new biennium. So it's a new 2-year legislative session. All bills that were introduced in 2025 and 2026 died in 2026. So in 2027, it'll be all new 2027 bill numbers. And then as the second year, 2027 introduced bills that weren't successful in 2027 can carry over into 2028. It's also the new 2-year fiscal budget. So 2027 is the first year of the executive budget. Uh, 2028 will be a supplemental budget year, similar to how 2026 was a supplemental budget year. And then there will be new legislators, and this really could come into play in terms of how you are working with different legislators. Um, by our count, looking at the elections, Hawaii elections website, it looks like there are 38 House seats, which have multiple names running an election, and 9 Senate seats. So it could be that people that have challengers in their districts might be busy um, talking to people, meeting with constituents, but also the idea of will those legislators be the legislator when the 2027 session starts? So these are just things to keep in mind. So in terms of finding other information that might be useful to you, and we're getting close to the end of the session now, um, we've got the LRB and the Public Access Room website that you can use. They're on the gray bottom, the same that the governor's website is linked from. You can also get to the Public Access Room through the Help and Info menu from the blue bar at the top of capitol.hawaii.gov. Um, the Legislative Reference Bureau provides session reports that could be interesting or useful to you if you go to the lrb.hawaii.gov page, which this QR code will go to. And then from the publications drop-down menu, you can go to session reports. You can get, this is a 2024 example since 2026 doesn't have all these documents yet. You can see legislative statistics, how many bills were introduced, how many have passed. And then you can find a supplemental information relating to bills passed document. And that can help you find acts by topic. So this is an example of the index for that document. So if you want to see where bills are and what they're about, you could look at that. You can also see laws affected by bills passed. So to get an idea of what sections of the HRS are going to be amended, for example. And then back to the Public Access Room website. We have a Learn tab on the PAR website where we have our new advocates guide that we released in January, as well as different segments of information like idea to introduction or what a bill's journey is, about the anatomy of a bill that you can find out more. We have our Engagement 101 page where you can watch short videos or find our handouts about how to sign up for hearing notices or submit testimony or create a measure tracking list. We've got our PAR newsletter page, which I know a lot of you signed up for the workshop because we advertised it in our newsletters. We don't do a lot of newsletters, but it is a place that we especially talk about upcoming workshops. So here's a QR code to sign up for our newsletters, or you can sign up by going to the PAR website and clicking on newsletters. You can also see the old newsletters there. We have a page on how to communicate with legislators through our Persist tab. And then I wanted to just briefly mention the LRB library. We go there for information sometimes. This QR code on this page goes to the LRB website, but from there you can click on divisions and get to library. From the library's webpage, you can find out their hours, the location and phone number and email. You can get to the library catalog. Sometimes PAR will look at the library catalog because that's a place that also will list reports to the legislature, for example, in addition to being posted on the capital.hawaii.gov page. And this QR code goes to the library website. One more thing I want to show you on the library website is the library, LRB librarians every working day will pull together clippings of online news for people that want to receive it. And you can fill out just above the archives list there where you can go back and see all these articles. You can put your email address in and receive lists of articles that they are finding. Just keep in mind that anything that has a paywall where you need to have a subscription, like for the Star Advertiser, for example, it's not going to get you past that paywall, but it is pulling together local news that is relevant to Hawaii. And then finally, just keep in mind that you can follow all the rules and not get the result you hope for. As we say, only about 10% of bills introduced are signed into law in any given year. Um, so it's not always that the outcome is up to you, but if you are disappointed, we hope that you don't stay too long, that you can repurpose your energy to working again next year. Keep us in mind for our social media. We've got our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And this recording will be posted to our YouTube channel in a day or two. And then, does anybody have any questions?
We did get one question, just clarifying that June 20th next January, the third Wednesday in January is June 20th. So
Did I have it marked wrong?
no, it was on the 21st, which was this
Okay, sorry about that.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
So yeah, just clarifying that it is June 20th. So the bill introduction cutoff will probably come around June 28th or so next year. But other than that, great job, Andy. We do not have any questions in the chat. But if anybody has questions, feel free to ask. Wait, there's one more, I think. Yeah, January 20th. We're in June, so once we get past the session, like most of the session staff's just thinking about summer.
Yeah, so thank you for everybody's time for joining us. I hope you guys are getting to relax as well.
Oh, so Leila is asking what happens to the budget bill if it's on the intent to veto list. You want to answer that, Andy?
Yeah, so the governor has to put things on the intent to veto list if he's even just considering it. So depending on whether if the legislature cut programs that he wants to see funded, he could try to rearrange the budget bill um, to to make that work. Um, it's very, very, very unlikely that he will veto the budget bill in its entirety. It's more likely that he will make little adjustments to it. So usually once the intent to veto list comes out at the end of this month, there will be bills on it that he may not actually follow through with a veto. Other things to consider is things that aren't on the intent to veto list will become law, whether he signs it into signature or if he doesn't sign it into signature, anything that's unsigned that wasn't vetoed will become law on July 15th.
Yeah.
And
So, um, So just confirming what Andy mentioned is that the appropriations in the budget bill will go through. And then whatever the governor makes adjustments to, it'll go through according to the adjustments that the governor makes in his veto. So he'll have a rationale for the adjustments that he makes. But because he has to put the whatever bill he's wanting to veto on the intent to veto list. That's why it's on there. But he's not going to veto the budget bill in its entirety. He'll make some adjustments to it. So the appropriations will go through, and he'll make adjustments to the appropriations that he feels he needs to. So, and those adjustments will end up in the final version of the budget. You're welcome. Does anybody else have questions? We'll be here through sessions. So Andy and I are full-time staffers. We're here through all the session into the interim into next session. So if anything comes up during the interim period, feel free to call us or email us. We're always here. So we'll always be happy to help. Yeah.
I have a question. Some bills get signed with like a public ceremony, some others just get signed. Like, is there like a rule or like a way to, it just depends on the governor's team, or I just wanna know, we're waiting for 6 bills to be signed.
Yeah, so those usually a request is made to the governor's office, either by the bill introducer or the groups that made the bill possible. A legislator will make a request for signing, a public bill signing. So those requests go through the governor's office, to the governor's team, and they work that request out. And that's done, yeah, when the governor has, according to the governor's schedule. So those are requests that are made directly to the governor for public bill signings.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I think that's it.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll email everybody that attended with the recording and we'll put it on YouTube.